In the first part of my theory on Felonious Gru, we discussed a lot. You'll need to see it before this one so you can find it by clicking on the little eye, rectangular box thingy that'll pop up in the top right corner of the screen now, because it is deep. Until I'd actually scanned the movie from top to bottom for evidence, I thought it was just boring and surface level, but the evidence I discovered, the timeline I constructed, should indicate completely otherwise. So watch it, because in it, I talk about how Dr. Nefario and Gru seem to have known each other for a very long time, but where did it start? How do the characters of Minions relate to the main series? What's the Anti-Villain League's true agenda? In the first half of the video, I established and solved the entire timeline of Gru and Nefario's relationship and solved a deep secret about Nefario. In the second half, I transitioned into proof I had that the Anti-Villain League is evil. I then tied that to a very good theory by a Reddit user, and I elaborated on both, mixing it all together to construct an unlikely but amazing conspiracy at the end. I hit y'all with a bombshell next-level conspiracy at the end, which was obviously unlikely, but I'm returning now so that I can go even deeper with that utterly ridiculous idea and see if I can retrieve any evidence to actually prove it in the process. Hello, I'm the Theorizer. Before I delve into the theory that is the mix of mine and the Reddit users, I must first clarify a couple more things regarding the timeline of Gru and Nefario's relationship. I'm sure a few of you have recognized Nefario's inconsistencies. For example, he tells Gru at the beginning of the first movie that he has no idea how they'll get the money required for their lunar heist. Now, this should indicate that he had no idea Gru was planning this. However, later in the movie, this plot hole is filled. Nefario blatantly informs Gru of how they've been planning this for years. This should mean that what he meant when he called Gru at the beginning was simply that he had no idea how, at this specific moment, they'd get the money required for their grand heist. So with that little issue resolved and out of the way, we can transition smoothly into the, I'll admit, currently ludicrous hypothesis I created last time. Again, what I did was construct a decent argument that stated the Anti-Villain League has suspicious intent. They have the required technology and money to stop any villain, yet they can't seem to do anything correctly, so they might not be so anti-villain after all. I mixed this little theory with a fan theory by a Reddit user, which hypothesized that Herb and Scarlet from Minions are actually Lucy Wilde's parents, and they were hired by the AVL after its creation due to Scarlet Overkill's near destruction of England. Again, watch part 1. By mixing these two ideas, I concluded that Scarlet Overkill and her husband ended up actually full-on corrupting the AVL over the course of their years of working there. And here's the thing. I am aware that this is overthinking, but that's kind of the point, because doing this is what brings on logical conclusions. If you've seen my incredibly lengthy series of theories on the movie Coraline, then you'll know that overthinking the idea of a supernatural cat with DID being possessed by a Lovecraftian-esque alienated dimensional plane of sapience is what can lead to some truly logical and grounded truths in the end that end up being obvious but utterly fundamental. So acknowledging that, what new evidence do I have? Well, I simply realized that almost all of the technology the AVL uses has a very distinct engineering style seen elsewhere. Minions has this very slick and distinct tech created by none other than Herb. That very compact style and slick engineering isn't seen elsewhere. Gru's machines are very utilitarian. El Machos are, well, Mexican, and Herb's are incredibly spy-oriented. But that's not much, because there's more. The AVL has a track record of hiring villains. See, well, Gru himself. They do it because they're incompetent on their own, because it's possible they were led by Scarlet Overkill to retrieve the crown from Gru. Common goal. They were unsuccessful. How do I know? Well, if you observe closely, which apparently I and the Easter egg gurus of the world have, in the first film, when Gru makes his depressing speech, we get yet more proof that Illumination plans years in advance because we see the British crown in his lair. Now. It looks different than the one in Minions. Minute details aren't the same, you get the idea, but its overall design is so similar. Animation films do this all the time. When they bring back a character or object, they will subtly tweak the way it looks to make it more accurate. Like, you don't really think Andy has a different mom for every Toy Story film, right? That moment of pause was so that all of the theorists watching could dawn on that idea and plan to formulate it into a video. You're welcome. Regardless though, it's unlikely they're all different moms, it's just a model change. Same goes for Rumpelstiltskin in Shrek the Third. He was drastically changed for the final chapter, but they made sure to keep the same overall style. They just had better model makers and they tried to make it look more realistic. I mean, how many crowns are there that look this similar, and how or why would Gru need to steal several of them? No idea, because it ain't like that. So my point is this, Gru managed to hold on to it for all those years, but here's what I think. I think when Gru was getting the money to build the rocket, and the minions held that crown up to sell it, I think I know who they sold it to. They sold it back to England. Any coincidence then, you think, that only a little while later, the Anti-Villain League contacted Gru? He returned what he stole. England enlisted his help. Coincidence? No. However, there's also a big throne there too, so I assume he ended up going back there for one of the royal chairs, which I believe they also returned at this time. Anyways, want more evidence that Scarlet and Herb could be Lucy's parents? Okay. Lucy has the same rare-ish green eye color that both Herb and Scarlet share. Green eyes can often be associated with red hair, also a mutation known to skip generations. See the lack of it in Herb and Scarlet. And the genetics do line up, there's just a lot of logical holes with them being a part of the AVL. I mean, the AVL is suspicious. If they were truly all-out heroic, then Gru wouldn't be required to sneak past the mall security guards. The AVL would just gain police governmental access to the mall's security and allow Gru to inspect free of hindrance, but they don't. And Lucy doesn't seem to be the type to fully understand her daughters. She may come off as a loving mother, but she doesn't quite understand the types of activities children prefer doing, and a red flag can be seen when Lucy stands up to the weird mother in Despicable Me 3. She loses it on her. The mother tries cursing Margot, and Lucy says, "I'm the last person in the world you would want to mess with." Yeah, that's totally not horrifyingly alarming at all. The plot holes of the AVL being evil, though, are very basic. Simply this, why would they hire Gru to begin with? Why try at all? Is it an incredibly elaborate scheme to fool their main field agents Gru and Lucy so that they can continue operating evilly behind their own backs? Possibly? I don't know. So here's just the thing. Do we know if Scarlet Overkill was overkilled by Gru or his dad? That's what my question was last time. A few commenters reminded me that Drew told Gru that Robert was proud of the moon heist, or rather, Gru's villainy in general, in which case Drew reached out to Gru sometime immediately after Robert died. Basic temporal deduction. Ergo, Robert died just prior to the events of Despicable Me 3. However, Gru, a villain fanatic, never had heard of the Bald Terror, Robert's villain name. How could felonious Gru, a villain so obsessed with villain culture, never hear of one of the most famous villains in history? In that case, his mother and Nefario likely shielded Gru from the knowledge through despicable means. Still, this means Robert was likely also out of the villainous spotlight at the time of him having children, since that was around the time that Scarlet Overkill became titled as the world's greatest villainess. So caring for Drew was what forced him to step out of the villainous limelight, similarly to what Gru did with his 3 daughters. Pattern here, and Robert never went to seek out Gru at his ex-wife's request. But what killed Robert? The Anti-Villain League? Scarlet Overkill getting revenge? Lucy? And this is as far as my logic can take me. I've planted all I absolutely possibly can for this, and the only final step is to formulate it together in a completely inductive and theoretical manner. Theorize in the comments below. I've laid the bricks for this conspiracy, but apologies, I can take it no further at this time. But stay up to date, because I don't like leaving things unfinished at all, and I'll return to this like I return to everything I stall. Until then, follow my Twitter and click the subscribe button and the little bell next to it if you want to be notified of when the next videos are actually coming. Make sure to click the all button instead of occasional when the pop-up appears. Thanks for indulging in my illogical logic. I'm the Theorizer.